What would you do if the family you trusted most became your worst nightmare? Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind closed doors in your neighborhood? Have you ever looked at that family who waves from their front porch every morning and wondered if their perfect life is exactly what it appears to be? In the quiet community of Willow Creek, Ohio, the Harper family represented everything good about small-town America. Samuel Harper was the kind of man who would drop everything to help a neighbor in need. Linda Harper could organize a charity event that would raise thousands of dollars in a single weekend. Their children were honor students, volunteers, and the kind of young adults that made parents proud. When people thought about the ideal American family, they thought about the Harpers. When local newspapers wrote about community heroes, the Harper name appeared in every article. When neighbors faced crisis, they knocked on the Harper door first. But what if I told you that this same family would become victims of one of the most shocking betrayals in Ohio criminal history? What if I told you that the love and trust that made them beloved would also make them vulnerable to someone they considered family? Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you could not see the danger they represented? Have you ever been so close to people that you never questioned their motives? The story you are about to hear is not just about murder. It is about how family disputes can escalate beyond anyone's worst fears. It is about how custody battles can transform into calculated revenge. It is about how the people who know your daily routine also know exactly when you are most vulnerable. If you are fascinated by true crime cases that reveal how quickly trust can turn deadly, subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex right now, because what happened to the Harper family will make you question everyone you think you know. The Harper family made one fatal mistake. They trusted the wrong people with their lives, their children, and their future. What happened next would prove that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous. In Willow Creek, Ohio, that lesson came with a price no family should ever have to pay. Multiple lives would be lost, a community would be shattered, and the question that would haunt everyone was simple yet terrifying. How do you protect yourself from people you love? This is the story of how a custody dispute became a massacre. This is the story of how family bonds became weapons of destruction. This is the story of the Harper family tragedy and the betrayal that no one saw coming. To understand what made the Harper tragedy so devastating, you need to know what this family meant to Willow Creek. The Harper legacy did not start with Samuel. It began 3 generations earlier, when his grandfather first settled in this Ohio town with nothing but determination and a dream. Samuel Harper embodied everything his grandfather had hoped for. He took a small repair shop and transformed it into the most trusted business in town. When your car broke down, you called Samuel. When your neighbors needed help moving, Samuel showed up with his truck. When community projects needed funding, Samuel quietly wrote the checks that made things happen. But Samuel was only half the equation. Linda Harper possessed that rare gift of making everyone feel like family. She remembered birthdays, brought meals during illnesses, and somehow knew exactly what to say when tragedy struck. Her kitchen table hosted more important conversations than the town hall ever did. If you wanted to know the heartbeat of Willow Creek, you listened to what people discussed over Linda Harper's homemade coffee and pie. Their 3 children seemed destined to carry on this incredible legacy. Olivia Harper, the eldest, graduated valedictorian from Willow Creek High School before earning her degree in social work. She returned home not for lack of opportunity elsewhere, but because she wanted to serve the community that had given her so much. Olivia ran the local literacy program and volunteered at the crisis center, helping families navigate their darkest moments. Mason Harper took a different path but with the same heart for service. After studying criminal justice, he joined the county sheriff's department, driven by an unshakable belief that everyone deserved protection and justice. His colleagues respected his integrity, and the community trusted him completely. Mason was the officer people requested when they needed someone who would listen, not just enforce. Grace Harper, the youngest, brought creative energy that balanced her family's serious dedication to service. She taught art classes at the community center and organized the annual Willow Creek Arts Festival that drew visitors from 3 counties. Grace challenged traditions, but always with love and respect for what came before. She painted murals that beautified downtown buildings and inspired local youth to express themselves through art. Together, the Harper family made Willow Creek better simply by being there. Annual Harper family reunions became community events. Their 4th of July barbecues fed anyone who showed up. During the devastating floods 2 years earlier, the Harpers opened their home to displaced neighbors and coordinated relief efforts that saved the town. Local newspaper articles praised their contributions. Church bulletins thanked them for their generosity. Children drew pictures of the Harper family helping their own families through difficult times. The mayor once said that if every community had a Harper family, America would never need to worry about its future. But behind every perfect family portrait lies a story you never see. What Willow Creek did not know was that perfection often attracts envy. Success can breed resentment, and sometimes, the very love that creates beautiful families also creates the vulnerabilities that destroy them. The Harper family's greatest strength, their trust in others, would become their greatest weakness. That weakness was about to be exploited by people they considered family. The bonds that made them strong would become the chains that bound them to their fate. It started with love, the kind of love that makes people believe in happily ever after. Olivia Harper met Lucas Whitlock during a community college fundraiser in the neighboring town of Cedar Falls. She was 23, passionate about social work, and determined to make a difference. He was 25, charming, intelligent, and everything her parents had hoped she would find in a partner. Lucas Whitlock came from what appeared to be a respectable family. His father, Ethan Whitlock, owned a successful construction company that had built half the commercial buildings in 3 counties. Ethan was known for his ambition and his ability to turn small projects into major contracts. He was the kind of man who always had his eye on the next opportunity, the next deal, the next chance to expand his influence. Marlene Whitlock, Lucas's mother, presented herself as the perfect supportive wife. She was quiet during public gatherings, but those who knew her well understood that she possessed a fierce determination that matched her husband's ambition. Marlene was the strategist behind many of Ethan's business successes, though she preferred to let him take the credit while she pulled the strings from behind closed doors. The youngest Whitlock, Noah, was 2 years younger than Lucas and struggled to find his place in a family driven by success and achievement. While Lucas possessed natural charm and intelligence, Noah harbored resentment about constantly living in his older brother's shadow. He worked for the family construction business but felt overlooked and undervalued, which created a bitterness that would eventually find a dangerous outlet. When Olivia and Lucas announced their relationship, both families celebrated. The Harpers welcomed Lucas with open arms, appreciating his intelligence and his apparent devotion to their daughter. The Whitlocks saw an opportunity to connect with one of the most respected families in the region. For 2 years, everything seemed perfect. Lucas and Olivia talked about marriage, shared dreams about their future, and seemed destined for the kind of partnership that creates strong families and stronger communities. When Olivia became pregnant with Lily, both families rejoiced. The baby represented hope, love, and the continuation of 2 family legacies. Samuel Harper built a nursery with his own hands. Linda Harper organized baby showers that brought both families together in celebration. Ethan Whitlock talked about the grandchild who would inherit the best of both family traditions. Lily Harper Whitlock was born healthy and beautiful, surrounded by love from grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who promised to protect and nurture her forever. But love stories do not always have happy endings. As Lily grew from infant to toddler, cracks began to appear in Olivia and Lucas's relationship. The pressures of young parenthood, combined with differing views about child rearing and family involvement, created tensions that neither had anticipated. The Harpers believed in community involvement and wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by the same values that had shaped their family for generations. The Whitlocks had different ideas about exclusivity and control, preferring to limit outside influences on their granddaughter's upbringing. What started as minor disagreements about bedtimes and babysitting arrangements escalated into heated arguments about where Lily should attend school, which family traditions she should follow, and who had the right to make decisions about her future. Comment below. Have you ever seen family disputes get out of control? Have you witnessed how quickly love can turn into something darker when children become involved? When Olivia and Lucas finally separated, the custody battle began immediately. Both families hired lawyers. Both sides claimed to have Lily's best interests at heart. Both families believed they were fighting for justice. The Whitlocks, accustomed to getting what they wanted through determination and strategic planning, could not accept that they might have limited access to their granddaughter. Ethan Whitlock viewed the custody dispute as another business deal to be won. Marlene Whitlock saw it as a war that required careful planning and ruthless execution. What started as love was about to become the catalyst for unspeakable evil. The custody battle would consume both families, destroy relationships that had taken years to build, and create the conditions for a betrayal that would shock an entire community. The custody battle was not going the way Ethan Whitlock had planned. For a man accustomed to winning every negotiation, every contract, and every business deal, the idea of losing access to his granddaughter felt like a personal insult. Ethan had built his construction empire by outmaneuvering competitors, by finding their weaknesses, and by doing whatever was necessary to secure victory. This custody dispute would be no different. Late at night, in the privacy of the Whitlock family study, conversations began to change. What started as frustrated discussions about legal strategies slowly transformed into something far more dangerous. Ethan convinced himself that the Harper family was deliberately trying to eliminate the Whitlocks from Lily's life entirely. Marlene Whitlock supported her husband's growing obsession. She had spent years building the family's reputation and influence, and she refused to watch it crumble because of a custody dispute. Marlene began researching the Harper family's daily routines, their work schedules, their social commitments. She told herself it was for legal purposes, but the level of detail she gathered went far beyond what any lawyer would need. Noah Whitlock became his father's most enthusiastic supporter. Finally, someone was paying attention to him. Finally, his father was treating him as an equal, rather than a disappointment. When Ethan began talking about taking more decisive action, Noah did not question the morality of what was being discussed. He saw only an opportunity to prove his worth to a father who had never given him the respect he craved. How well do you really know your in-laws? How well do you really understand what they are capable of when they feel threatened? Lucas Whitlock found himself trapped between two families he loved. His parents pressured him constantly to take a harder stance against Olivia and the Harpers. They questioned his loyalty, his commitment to his own family, and his willingness to fight for his daughter's future. During family dinners, the conversation always returned to the custody battle. Ethan would pound the table and declare that the Harpers were treating the Whitlocks like second-class citizens. Marlene would quietly suggest that perhaps more aggressive action was necessary. Noah would agree with everything his parents said, desperate for their approval. Lucas tried to mediate, tried to find compromise, tried to protect both families from the escalating conflict. But every attempt at peace was seen as weakness by his own family, and as manipulation by the Harpers. The secret meetings began in February. Ethan, Marlene, and Noah would gather after Lucas left for work, planning what they called their final solution to the custody problem. They told themselves they were protecting their family's interests, but the plans they discussed had nothing to do with legal custody arrangements. Phone records would later show dozens of calls between the three conspirators during this period. They used coded language, referring to their plan as a business acquisition that required the removal of competing interests. Ethan researched the Harper family's insurance policies. Marlene mapped out their daily routines down to the minute. Noah purchased equipment that had nothing to do with construction work and everything to do with violence. The planning consumed them. Every conversation revolved around timing, execution, and covering their tracks. They convinced themselves that they were justified, that the Harpers had forced them into this position, that they had no other choice. Lucas began to notice changes in his family's behavior. His father was more secretive about business meetings. His mother asked strange questions about Olivia's schedule and the Harper family's security measures. His brother suddenly had money for expensive purchases despite his modest salary. When Lucas questioned these changes, his family accused him of being paranoid and disloyal. They reminded him that his primary obligation was to his daughter and his blood family, not to the people who were trying to steal his child away from him. The Whitlocks were not just planning to win custody, they were planning to eliminate the competition entirely. By March, the conspiracy had evolved from angry discussions to detailed preparation. The Whitlock family had crossed a line from which there would be no return. They had decided that if they could not have Lily through legal means, they would ensure that no one else could have her either. The Harper family had no idea what was coming. October 15th started like any other day in Willow Creek. It would end in unimaginable terror. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and the promise of an early winter. Samuel Harper spent the morning at his shop, finishing repairs on Mrs. Johnson's truck. Linda Harper attended her weekly volunteer meeting at the community center, planning the upcoming harvest festival. Olivia Harper worked late at the crisis center, helping a young mother navigate an abusive relationship. None of them knew they were living their final hours. The Whitlock family had spent months preparing for this night. Every detail had been planned, every contingency considered, every possible witness eliminated from the equation. They knew Samuel always locked up his shop at exactly 7:30 in the evening. They knew Linda would be home alone until Olivia returned from work. They knew Mason would be driving his usual route home from the sheriff's department. They knew Grace would be at her art studio, working late on a mural commission, completely isolated and vulnerable. The first attack occurred at 8:15 in the evening. Samuel Harper was walking to his truck when three figures emerged from the shadows behind his shop. He recognized them immediately. People he had trusted, people he had welcomed into his home, people he had considered family. His final words, according to witness testimony, were a question: "What are you doing here?" The answer came in the form of violence so brutal that the crime scene investigators would later struggle to document the evidence. Samuel Harper, the man who had helped build Willow Creek into a thriving community, died alone in the parking lot of his own business. Olivia Harper arrived home at 8:45 to find her mother's car in the driveway, but the house strangely quiet. She called out as she entered through the front door, expecting to hear Linda's voice from the kitchen or living room. Instead, she found her mother on the floor of the hallway, the victim of an attack that had occurred just minutes earlier. Olivia never had the chance to call for help. The same three figures who had killed her father were waiting for her return. They had studied her schedule, knew her habits, and planned her death with the same attention to detail they had used for the others. At 9:20, Mason Harper was driving home from his shift at the sheriff's department when his truck was forced off rural Route 12 by another vehicle. He survived the initial crash but was killed when his attackers approached the wreckage. Mason Harper, the officer who had dedicated his life to protecting others, could not protect himself from people who had planned his murder for months. Rachel Porter, Mason's fiancée, had been following behind him in her own car, planning to surprise him with dinner from his favorite restaurant. She witnessed the crash and immediately called for emergency assistance before rushing to help. Rachel became an unplanned casualty, killed simply because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Grace Harper was alone in her art studio when they found her at 9:45. She had been working on a mural depicting the history of Willow Creek, a project that celebrated the community she loved. Grace fought back, using her art supplies as weapons, but she was outnumbered and overpowered. Hit that like button if this story is keeping you on edge, because what happened next would shock experienced investigators who thought they had seen everything. Detective Carla Monroe received the first emergency call at 10:18 that evening. A passing motorist had discovered Samuel Harper's body behind his shop and called 911 in a panic. Detective Monroe, a 15-year veteran of the county sheriff's department, initially assumed she was responding to a robbery gone wrong. Within an hour, she realized she was dealing with something far more complicated and far more deadly. By midnight, 4 crime scenes had been identified across Willow Creek. 4 separate locations where members of the Harper family had been systematically murdered within the span of 90 minutes. The coordination required, the planning involved, and the ruthless execution of the attacks indicated a level of premeditation that chilled even experienced law enforcement officers. Detective Monroe stood in the Harper family home, looking at photographs on the mantelpiece, trying to understand how a family so beloved could become the target of such hatred. She had investigated hundreds of crimes, but nothing had prepared her for the systematic destruction of an entire family. The community's first glimpse of the horror came when emergency vehicles filled the streets of Willow Creek. Neighbors gathered behind police barriers, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The people they had trusted, the family they had loved, had been eliminated in a single night of calculated violence. October 15th would forever mark the day that innocents died in Willow Creek, Ohio. Detective Carla Monroe had seen violent crime before, but nothing like this. 4 murders in 90 minutes, executed with military precision across multiple locations, suggested a level of planning that took her investigation in a completely different direction. The first breakthrough came from phone records. In the weeks leading up to October 15th, dozens of calls had been exchanged between Ethan Whitlock, Marlene Whitlock, and Noah Whitlock. The frequency and timing of these calls revealed a pattern of coordination that extended far beyond normal family communication. Digital forensics uncovered text messages between the conspirators that used coded language to discuss their plans. References to completing the project, removing obstacles, and finalizing the acquisition took on chilling new meaning when analyzed in the context of the murders. Surveillance footage from local businesses provided the second major breakthrough. Security cameras captured the Whitlock family members driving through Willow Creek on the night of the murders, visiting each location where attacks occurred. Their vehicles were recorded within minutes of each estimated time of death. The third piece of evidence came from Lucas Whitlock himself. Consumed by guilt and horror at what his family had done, Lucas contacted Detective Monroe 3 days after the murders. He provided detailed information about his family's planning meetings, their discussions about eliminating the Harper family, and their systematic preparation for the attacks. How would you feel if you woke up to discover your trusted neighbors were capable of this level of betrayal and violence? How would you process the knowledge that people you had known for years had planned and executed the murder of an entire family? The community of Willow Creek struggled to accept the truth. Many residents initially refused to believe that the Whitlock family could be responsible for such horror. These were people they had worked with, bought services from, and trusted with their own families. News media descended on the small town within hours of the arrests. National television crews broadcast live from the town square where Harper family memorial services had been held just days earlier. Reporters interviewed shocked residents who struggled to find words for their grief and disbelief. The investigation revealed that the Whitlock family had purchased equipment specifically for the attacks. Credit card records showed purchases of items that had no connection to their construction business, but everything to do with committing violence. They had researched the Harper family's insurance policies, daily schedules, and security measures. Most disturbing was the discovery that the murders had been planned as a murder-suicide. The Whitlocks intended to kill themselves after eliminating the Harper family, making it appear that grief over the custody battle had driven them to desperation. Only Lucas's unexpected return to town that night had prevented them from completing their final act. Detective Monroe's methodical approach revealed a conspiracy that stretched back months. Financial records, psychological evaluations, and witness testimony painted a picture of a family that had convinced themselves that murder was their only option. The evidence was overwhelming. The premeditation was undeniable. The betrayal was complete. Within 2 weeks, all 3 conspirators were in custody, facing multiple charges of first-degree murder. The investigation that began with 4 crime scenes had uncovered a level of family dysfunction and calculated evil that would haunt Willow Creek for generations. The trial of Ethan, Marlene, and Noah Whitlock began 6 months after the murders that destroyed the Harper family. The courthouse in downtown Cedar Falls became the center of media attention as prosecutors presented evidence that documented one of the most calculated family betrayals in Ohio history. Detective Monroe's testimony formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. She presented phone records, surveillance footage, financial evidence, and witness statements that painted an undeniable picture of premeditated murder. The jury listened in stunned silence as she described how the Whitlock family had systematically planned the elimination of their former in-laws. The defense attorneys attempted to argue that grief and desperation over the custody battle had driven the Whitlocks to temporary insanity. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors revealed the months of planning, the careful coordination of attacks, and the purchase of equipment specifically for committing violence. Lucas Whitlock's testimony proved to be the most emotionally devastating moment of the trial. He took the stand as the prosecution's key witness, forced to testify against his own parents and brother. Lucas described the family meetings where murder was discussed, the pressure he faced to participate, and his growing horror as he realized what his family intended to do. His voice broke as he apologized to the memory of the Harper family and to the community that had lost so much. Lucas's testimony sealed the fate of his family members while destroying any remaining relationships he had with them. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Ethan Whitlock received 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Marlene Whitlock received the same sentence. Noah Whitlock, despite his younger age, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and continued grief as the sentences were announced. Family friends of the Harpers wept, not from joy, but from the knowledge that no amount of justice could bring back the people they had lost. But would justice truly heal a community torn apart by betrayal? The residents of Willow Creek struggled with that question long after the trial ended. The Whitlock construction business collapsed, leaving dozens of employees without work. Properties that had been built by the company became constant reminders of the family that had shattered their community. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. The trust that had defined Willow Creek for generations had been broken, and many wondered if it could ever be fully restored. In the months following the trial, Willow Creek began the long process of healing. Community leaders organized support groups for residents struggling with trauma and betrayal. Local churches held weekly meetings where people could share their fears and work through their grief together. The Harper Memorial Foundation was established to honor the family's legacy of service. The foundation provides counseling services for families experiencing custody disputes and offers mediation resources to prevent conflicts from escalating into violence. 3 scholarships in the Harper family name are awarded annually to students pursuing careers in social work, law enforcement, and education. Detective Monroe became a passionate advocate for early intervention in family disputes. She travels across Ohio, speaking to law enforcement agencies about recognizing the warning signs of domestic conspiracy and family-related violence. Her presentations emphasize the importance of taking custody battles seriously and monitoring for signs of escalating aggression. Monroe frequently tells audiences that the Harper case taught her that family relationships can become the most dangerous when they involve children, money, or perceived threats to family honor. She encourages people to seek professional help when family disputes become consuming obsessions. The town established new protocols for reporting suspicious behavior and created a family crisis intervention team that responds to domestic disputes before they escalate. These programs have already prevented 2 potentially violent confrontations between feuding families in neighboring counties. Subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex and share this story with others, because these lessons could save lives. Understanding how family loyalty can be twisted into justification for violence might help someone recognize danger in their own situation. The Harper family's legacy lives on, not in their tragic end, but in the warning their story provides. Their tragedy reminds us that trust must be balanced with awareness. Family relationships require boundaries, even with people we love. Custody disputes need professional mediation, not private vengeance. And when someone begins talking about eliminating obstacles or removing competition, those words should be taken seriously. The Harper family believed in the goodness of people until their final moments. While that trust ultimately cost them their lives, their story now serves as a beacon for others navigating dangerous family dynamics. Sometimes the greatest act of love is recognizing when someone you care about has become someone you should fear.